Good evening. Well, it's really exciting to see you, given that this is the last session of the day. So good job, you all made it. Congratulations. So I'm really excited about what we'll be covering today. I'm also excited about the keynote session that we had earlier in the morning. I acknowledge that the keynote address really set the base or the foundation of what this topic is set to cover. And if you were there, John really demystified what it looks like to work and coexist with artificial intelligence. And that is really what we are going to speak more in this, in the next 30 or so minutes. So in the morning, John kind of covered the PGI, was it PGI? PDI blueprint. And so we're going to just focus more on the people. And in this case, the people is going to be the developers. That's the persona that we're going to focus more on. So in the last 3-4 years, we have seen a series of AI news. And quite frankly, this has been too much. Left, right, and center, news around GPT, Copilot, RAG, ChatGPT, just a lot of back-to-back announcements around generative AI and what this can impact in our lives. But I want each and every one of us to just take a moment and just pause. Then think about how these back-to-back announcements have really affected you as an individual. So just block everything out for a second. Just think about how these back-to-back announcements around generative AI, how have they affected you? How have they affected how you work? How have they affected how you learn? Your perception of the industry, and even your expectations from the industry. How has this affected you down at a personal level? Now, I wouldn't want to shut down anyone who wants to share with us how they feel impacted at a personal level with AI. So in case we have any brave soul that would want to share, you can share that with us. Or if not, just a good thing to think about. Just think about how this has really come down to impacting you on your day-to-day activities. I love working with students. I really think that students, being the next generation of developers and professionals, have a lot to share. And in my recent engagements with students, what I've picked is that students have a lot of fear. Students are really scared that AI is leaving no room for them in the career workspace. Students are terrified. And the question that is lingering through the minds of most students is, why do I have to sit through a data structures and algorithms class? And God knows that's not the easiest thing to do. So why do I have to go through all that if anyone, emphasis here being on anyone, can just write a comment in their native language and AI can instantly spit out the code that they need? Why do I have to go through all that? Professionals who are already in the industry are already seeing their roles being reimagined, evolving, just to accommodate this new capacity that AI is bringing along. Developers like you are torn between the impact of generative AI and how this will displace them in their current roles. And so in the next few minutes, my hope is that we'll have a discussion and we'll just try to paint a picture of how it looks like in a world where developers and AI coexist, co-create, and co-produce software. So my name is Julia, and I work at Microsoft as a cloud developer advocate in the JavaScript team. So if you have any questions or feedback along that side, I'm happy to have conversations, and I can route you to the experts in case you need further assistance. So I started by asking how you felt impacted by AI at a personal level, but now let's look at some of the data from a broader representation of how developers feel and already feel the impact of technology, and specifically AI. Now, this is a result of a survey that was run by /Data. And as you can see, we had approximately 8,400 developers participate, and 80% of these developers agreed that AI will increase their potential and productivity. 70% of these developers went on to agree that AI will allow them to use programming tools that they could never use before. Now, in the same survey, another question was asked, and this question mainly is focusing on what a developer's goal is when they make the decision to purchase a developer tool. So think about the developer tools you've been using over the years, and just think about what was your goal when you made the decision to purchase or to start using it. And as expected, the first three responses are around improving and increasing productivity, code quality, and performance. Now, what is interesting to me is that question 1 specifically called out the impact from generative AI. Question 2 is specifically calling out the developer tools. So what this data tells me is that there's this phrase we use back in Kenya. It's called "kwa ground vitu ni different." That just means people will just hype things up, but when you come in reality on the ground, things are different. So how developers are feeling impacted is that AI is just another tool. AI is just another capability that you're adding to their tool sets. Today, if I woke up and I went into a tomato plantation and I started manually just digging up holes and planting my crops, I'm doing my job. If another person goes to the same plantation and they decide to just bring an ox and just plow through the land, they are doing their job, but they will do it faster. A different person goes to the same plantation, brings along a tractor, they will possibly do the same job, they will do it faster, arguably they will do it better. So AI is just another tool set that has been added to what developers can just hold on and use as one of their productivity tools. But there's more towards this word called productivity. And productivity can really mean anything in the context of your organization. For you, productivity could be the time that you take to ship code. For you, productivity could be the amount of time that the frequency of your deployments. For another organization, productivity could be the time that they take to restore services. But for the sake of this presentation, we'll simply look at productivity as the effectiveness of carrying out work-related tasks. So technically, if a developer is distracted, they are not productive. We can work with that definition for this talk. And you see that from the same research that was being conducted by Slashdata, 74% of the developers who are working professionally in a company spend between 15 minutes and 90 minutes per day looking for answers to questions that are bugging them. 74% of these developers, on an average of 60 minutes every single day, are stuck, are trying to find solutions. Now imagine you have an engineering team of 30 engineers. That's 30 hours a day of being confused, of just trying to look for answers. And this is the gap that AI is really coming in to address. Given 30 hours back at your organization, what can you do? But I know to some extent, this still isn't convincing. There's still a majority of the developer community that thinks AI is still there to replace them. So one of my mentors actually shared a really interesting analogy with me. And right, before we get there, this term productivity, you see that statistics from one of the widely adopted AI tools, that is GitHub Copilot, that is currently being used by over 1 million developers across the globe. From the data, we see that for those who use Copilot, they spend 87% less mental effort on the repetitive tasks. So this is a contribution of the 60 minutes of lost time at your organization. And you can see by leveraging such tools, you're actually spending 87% less mental effort on that. 74% of them focus on more satisfying work. So if for you, writing tests is what counts as satisfactory work, then you can have AI do everything else for you and focus on what you count as satisfactory work. If for you, what satisfies you the most at work is going out there, interacting with clients, getting to hear their pain points, trying to brainstorm on new and creative ideas to address them, then you can use AI to quickly finish up on everything else, then focus more on what you count as satisfactory work. 73% of these developers also say they are more in the flow. I don't know about you, but sometimes I found myself encountering an engineering problem, and then I go off, try looking for an answer. But in the process, reading through the documentation, I realized there's a typo, and I want to contribute to that. So I just click the GitHub icon, and I start contributing to that. I see a flashy new announcement of a new model. I read on that. And at the end of the day, I just try and remember, oh, there's something I was trying to do. So 73% of developers admit that they actually feel more in the flow. They're actually delivering software faster because they are more connected. We are reducing the distractions. So the analogy that one of my mentors shared to kind of help me set this mindset of how I can coexist with AI is the analogy of a car. I don't know how possible it is to trace back to when the initial idea of a car was generated, but my guess would be we're talking centuries ago. But what we have come to know of the definition of a car has changed in the given years. We've seen cars coming in different shapes, in different sizes, having more power. We've just seen a new model of cars every now and then. And this is also what AI thinks cars will look like in the next few years. I don't know how true that is. But if you choose to dissect this, what really lies under the hood, what powers what we know as the idea of our car, is really just these basic components. We have the core components, the body, the frame, the engine, transmission, talk about the wheeling system, the electric system. These are the core components that remain constant over the years. Yes, we see advancements, we see changes, and we come to know different understanding of how a car can work, but what powers it under the hood really remains the same. And the same applies to software. And I use this analogy mainly when talking to students, when they ask, do I really need to grasp the fundamentals of computer science? Given AI, it's going to be useless if you can't build that core infrastructure. So the building blocks of software development still remain the same, and AI is just coming to make it more efficient, to make it more productive. And this is just a talk to see how can we leverage it more. And so with that, we're just going to also think about something slightly different. I'm a huge believer that it's very much possible to be moving at 1,000 miles an hour, but in the wrong direction. And I think it's a high chance that we paused for a moment and think, if I'm learning a new skill, if I'm building something new, how relevant is it? Where is this skill headed? So this definitely calls for change. This calls for a restructure. I phrase it as everyone needing to have their own personal AI strategy. What can I do with AI to be better at what I do? So AI didn't just start the last 3-4 years, but this can go way beyond the 1950s, but let's just start from there. So in the 1950s, when the initial idea of AI just traversing the population, we saw humans needing to adapt. Humans started to develop these interdisciplinary skills, combing through skills like mathematics, engineering, computer science, all in an attempt to build digital skills and digital systems that will use this AI. Now, in the 1960s and 1970s, we now saw a period of AI research where it was now becoming evident that people wanted to learn more about what powers this artificial intelligence. In the 1980s, this introduced us to what is called the AI winter, where there was some sort of starvation to the AI research department, and the research sort of halted, and humans were forced to adapt again and just see how they can apply this AI in different domains. So they shifted towards the practicability and the application of artificial intelligence. In the 1990s, massive volumes of data were being generated from AI. And so humans, again, were forced to pivot their workflows and factor in a data analyst, a data scientist to come in and try and make sense of all this data that they were receiving. Now, in the 2000s, we get now concepts like machine learning, deep learning, where we have massive data. What more can we do with it? And now in the 2010 era, we've now come to see artificial intelligence beat human beings at specific tasks. It has come to a point where there's a task that can actually be performed better by AI in comparison to how a human being would execute it. And so when we get to this point, humans are being forced to learn and to develop skills that will help us understand how can we coexist with this technology, in that it's not there to replace us, but how can we use it to make what we do be more efficient? So how do we coexist with artificial intelligence? And now what we've seen in the last couple of years, from the 2020s, is that AI has become more pervasive. At this point, everyone can interface with artificial intelligence in their natural language. It's growing at a significantly high speed. And this calls for that change in the mindset that we have. This is what we are seeing as this transformation that is being brought about by AI. And the reality is, if we choose to ignore this, we will definitely pay the cost of trying to catch up with this, just as it was shared in the keynote earlier. So we look at these two dimensions in which AI is specifically affecting developers. And the first one is optimizing the developer experience. And this is what we're going to focus more for the rest of the presentation. The main question being, how do we make the developer experience more efficient? How do we make it to be more productive? The other way that AI is impacting developers is through building intelligent apps. Now clients have different expectations. Everyone wants AI capabilities in what they deliver. So how are we leveraging AI to ensure that we are delivering robust systems that meet the needs, the ever-changing needs of our clients? So we'll focus more on the developer experience. And by a show of hands, I would like to ask, how many of us in the room are already using AI tools? So you're using Copilot, Tab9. So just by a show of hands. Wonderful. So I would like to just have you keep those hands raised, and then everyone else just look around. I know this is a very last session, but ensure you speak to these people, because chances are they have used these tools in ways that we will not even expound on today. And Copilot, among the other AI-powered tools, are some of the tools that the more you use them, the more you unlock ways they can be helpful in your organization. So speak to these people before they leave. Just get to hear their use cases. How are they using these tools? What are the challenges they are facing? And based on that, you'll actually unlock and just think of ways that this can be useful to your organization. Now let's think about the builders of this technology. What do they have in mind? The end goal here is to bring AI to where the developers are. Developers value time just in a dark room with dark mode everywhere, just writing code. That's where the developers want to be. So we are bringing AI to just exactly where the developers are. These developers need to get up to speed with code really, really fast. They're struggling writing boilerplate code, just writing the same piece of code over and over again. These developers are having sleepless nights over missing semicolons. So how can we make this life better for developers? And so again, we're going to analyze more about GitHub Copilot, but I think this cuts across the different AI-powered tools that we interact with. And one of the changes that we actually see being brought about with these tools is that as a developer, you can now spend less time on such repetitive tasks. Writing tests, I know we might have people who love doing this, but it's good having an option not to have to write this, but have a code that has tests. Debugging, this can also be a pain. So how can AI help me with some of these tasks that I consider to be very, very taxing for me? Searching documentation, who wants to do that? But it's really exciting to just have an interface where I can just quickly, in natural language, just interact with my documentation, finding vulnerabilities and the likes. Now, this also presents an opportunity for you to also now spend more time on tasks that revolve around designing, brainstorming, collaborating, and this is what we see as that transformation. We've seen over the years how humans have had to adapt, to accommodate what AI brings with it. And now we see that in the last couple of years, we are being called to develop more of our soft skills, our emotional intelligence. How do we interact with clients? How do we pick some of the unarticulated needs that they had, that we actually missed out when we were designing the products that we had? So we are now given a chance to spend more time on such tasks and then just quickly deliver these to our clients. So that is what this transformation is being brought about by artificial intelligence. Now, another thing that helps for us to know that there's no way that this technology is actually here to replace us is by trying to understand how it works under the hood. So when these technologies are being designed, how is the design process? How do they actually put these pieces together? And what we see here is just a breakdown of how GitHub Copilot works. So right there on your IDE, you have your code, and we'll talk more about the context because this is what gets sent over to the proxy service. And this one now performs some services. So first, it's going to authenticate you. It's going to sanitize the code or whatever it is that is in that context. This way, no personal identifiable information is sent to the model. It also performs some sentiment analysis, just filtering out any abusive language. And then this data is sent into the model. And in this case, we're using the Codex OpenAI model, which now performs, and based on the data that it has been trained on, it's able to generate a response that is personalized for you to your ask. And then it will bring back data. This information goes through a security filter. Again, these tools don't want to give you code that already has some vulnerabilities. So there's that layer of security, but be warned, this is not a security feature to rely on. Again, it's just a tool, so whatever it is you do to ensure that your code is secure, ensure you still have that layer, and then you get this back in form of suggestions. We'll see how this is just a suggestion and what you can actually do with what you get back from these models. So I tend to think if we are using these AI tools, we at least can learn how to make the best out of them. So we're going to share just a few tips and tricks on how you can get the most out of GitHub Copilot in this case. So the first thing is open files. Just something as simple as having the files that you're working on open on your IDE or on your editor. That actually gives a lot of the context to this model, in that when you're asking a question to Copilot, it's not just taking the question that you've sent it to. It's actually going to analyze the entire file that you're working on. It's also going to check your environment. And if you have any other open files, chances are that these open files are the files that are related to that project. So it's also going to take that and build up this context that it's giving the model. That way it will give you better responses. So just one of the tips is just leave the files that you're working on open, and chances are that you're already doing this. So it's just a matter of knowing that, hey, this is actually what provides context to the model as I use it. Something to note is that if you're working on a project and you have your files closed, Copilot doesn't have any visibility on that. That's why the emphasis here is open that file, expose that to the model, and it's going to take that as context and ensure that it's giving you the best response that it's giving you. Number two is the top level comments. So think of this as giving the AI a goal, a vision. It's just like anyone. You wouldn't want to be working without a vision. You want to see the end goal. This is where I'm headed. The same case works for GitHub Copilot. Before you even start writing your code, at the very top, just write what it is you're trying to achieve. And what happens is you write your code down the line. If you're on your 100th line of code and you ask a question, it's always going to refer to the top comment and see what is it that we are trying to achieve. That way it will generally give you a better response. So that's the second tip. Just have that initial and the top level comments to kind of just give direction and to kind of just give that guidance to the model as it helps you through your programming. That tip is specific comments. Short and specific comments. I don't want a list, I want an array, simple. Because this model has a lot of knowledge, it can give you practically anything, but try and help it help you better. Be very specific in the comments that you give it, that way you'll get better code. Includes and references. This is also recommended. As you're working with a tool like Copilot, it's very much possible for you to want to work with a specific package or a specific library, include that at the top of your file, and Copilot will now at least have a narrowed approach to what it's searching. It has a lot of knowledge. You don't want version 10, you specifically want version 8. Just include that, and Copilot will definitely have better responses for you. Then I'm happy that developers at DevConf always use meaningful variable names. Developers here don't use variable names like foo or a, b. That's something that I'm happy about. So this definitely helps, not just in making this code more readable for the code maintainer who will come after you, but also to have this model understand what exactly you're doing. To some extent, the name of your variable or the name of your function is context enough for the model to know exactly what you're trying to do. If you've used Copilot, you'll see that if you generate, say, def, then just the name of a function that is very descriptive, without adding any additional comment, it will just give you the exact code that you need. So this is definitely one of the helpful tips. Just ensure that you're working with meaningful names. Again, not just for the AI, but being mindful of the code maintainer that will come after you. And then giving it sample code, the concept of few-shot learning, where just by giving the model a few examples, 2, 3 examples of what you're working on, that's enough to give it an understanding of exactly how it can tailor your response for you. Something I forgot to mention about the open files point was, in most cases, organizations have their very specific and unique programming style sets. So if you're working with APIs, we have our own standards that we want to stick to. This also helps in that you'll find that the responses you get from Copilot already align to your organizational standards. So that way it's saving you the time that you'd actually need to go back and refactor this code. So again, these are just some of the tips and tricks, but the more you use these tools, the more you discover and unlock more potential from them. So Copilot is good for a lot of things, but let's just try and see a few of these workloads that Copilot is really known to do a good job. So the first one, writing basic code faster and better. So at times you just spend time writing code and think that, hey, there's clearly a better way to do this code, but you just don't want to think through that process. So in this case, you can see that just by highlighting that piece of code, right there on the editor, I'm asking Copilot, hey, help me improve this block of code. You'll see that from the response, it will acknowledge that, hey, this code actually works. It's functional, but you have some unnecessary steps. Here's how you can possibly improve it. So this way, it's just reducing the amount of time you would spend just trying to make and improve your code. Then what you'll actually notice is just before you get your response, there is the used one reference line. This is actually what you expect to see from any AI-powered tool, in that it's not just making things up. It's actually going into your workspace, it's going into your project, and deriving these responses and suggestions from there. Number 2, what Copilot is good for? Helping you remember stuff that you simply forgot. We are humans, we forget things. That doesn't make us bad people or any less developers. But AI is there just to help you remember the stuff that you forgot. You're working on a project, and just before you finish, you just see Copilot trying to prompt you, hey, you probably forgot to export this module. So this is another way that Copilot is helpful. Number 3, extending and refactoring existing code. So this is the same piece of code that I showed earlier. And right here on Visual Studio Code, using the inline for GitHub Copilot, you can see that I'm asking it just to improve this piece of code. And with that, you'll see that instantly it's just going to give me a suggestion of how you can make this code better. It also introduces an error, which I don't want, and I see the many options that Copilot gives me. Gives me option number 1, which is to accept this code. If I like what I see, I can simply accept that. Option 2, you can discard this if it doesn't work for you. Or option 3, you can iterate and build on this code. So let me discard this onto a clipboard or onto a new file and then work from there. So it's very tempting to think that you only get one option from Copilot. It actually gives you a bunch of suggestions. What you do with the code is dependent on what you want to do. So in this case, and it's actually recommended, iterate on the responses and on the suggestions that you get from these AI tools. Number 4, if I'm not mistaken, we have explaining unfamiliar code and documenting. So you just landed on a bunch of code and you're trying to make sense of it. And maybe in some cases, it's not just making sense. You want a simple explanation of what this means. And of course, you can't find whoever wrote that code. So what do? Right there on VS Code, using GitHub Copilot chat, you're simply just going to highlight this code And right there on the editor, you can ask something like, hey, explain. And you can use the slash commands, which basically just reduce the context of where Copilot is looking for. We begin by using the Art Workspace agent. So that's an agent or a participant where Copilot has a lot of knowledge. But when I use the Art Workspace, I'm practically telling Copilot, I know you know a lot of stuff, but just focus on my workspace. Get me information from this workspace. And then now using the slash command, I want it to perform just an explanation. So it's simply just going to go through the code and give me an explanation that is in English, of course, that I can read through and I can get started with this code. So this is one of the use cases of how you can use these AI tools in your workflows. The other use case is understanding error messages and in some cases fixing them. So you just have these amazing red squiggly lines, which we would rather do without. And right there on your editor, you can easily just say, help me fix this. And Copilot will instantly do that. In most cases, giving an explanation on what it's changing. That way, you are really cutting on the time that you would actually be spending trying to go on Stack Overflow and copying people's codes that you probably didn't even read in the first place. So the other way that Copilot is also known for is adding tests to a project. I think we had mentioned this earlier. So Copilot also has other use cases that are not commonly talked about. So the first one being, I know that we all enjoy thinking about commit messages, and we write very useful and descriptive commit messages. But now with AI, you can instantly just have a tool that will analyze the changes that you have done. And it's just going to generally create or generate a commit message that is going to be useful to anyone who's going to stumble upon your work. So this way, you actually see AI just helping you being a better developer. That way, in this case, I was actually going back to this project that I had not looked at for months, so I didn't even know what I did. And just right there, from the commit message, I could actually see, hey, what it is that I had worked on lastly. So the other thing is that think of a case where you want to pick up a new project. So you're on GitHub, I'm trying to find a project that has the tech stack that I want to work on, and you find this amazing README, but it's very long. So right there, you can see that we have the GitHub Copilot icon, and clicking on that, you're able to now have conversations, and you can actually click on this to index, and this way you're just mainly grounding the Copilot, and it's going to now have a better understanding of the one specific repository that you're referring to. So my question there was simple. Tell me about this repository, and in a matter of seconds, I can see a very detailed explanation of what this is about. It's also, the length is also nice, not too long, not too short, but I'm able to quickly pick up what this project is all about. If I want to contribute, if it's the kind of project I want to be involved with, this is definitely the right tool to get me started super, super fast. The other thing is pull request summaries. I don't know how long you guys spend writing pull request summaries, but something that is really awesome is that Copilot can instantly just analyze the work that you've done. So in this case, I had just finished a task that I was given, and just before creating my pull request, I asked Copilot to help me generate a summary. In a matter of seconds, Copilot just analyzed all the work that I had done, and in a matter of seconds, it created this really detailed summary of the work that I had done, and trust you me, this is not what I could have come up with. It's likely that I would have just written something, hey, I did this and this and this, or I did what you asked, but this is really detailed, and you can see it's also pointing to the exact places where I made the changes. So I only had one job, to give the pull request a meaningful name, and you see what I did there. So this is definitely how AI can help you in what you're doing. But now, this might sound all good, but it's also nice to just look at the flip side. The limit does exist. These are still AI-powered tools, so of course they come with a lot of limitations. Let's just talk about three. The first one is the training data that impacts the suggestions. So if the training data is outdated, there's no way you'll get a suggestion that will be useful, right? A practical example is, I don't know how many of you work with Azure Functions or serverless compute. So I know that in September last year, we had version 4 of the Node.js programming language. And Azure Functions basically just released version 4 in September last year. Now, I was working on a project that used functions, and I quickly just want Copilot to help me generate a function, and I asked it, help me generate a function that does this, this, and this. And it gave me a good response, but it was using version 3 of the programming model. Now, Copilot wasn't wrong. It gave me good code. As far as it was concerned, it gave me the right things. But as a developer, knowing what is out there and how fast technology is moving, I knew that this is not the best approach for my clients. This is not what will help my clients. With V4, it comes with additional benefits that will be helpful for my clients. Now, as the developer, I know how to do that task best, but the AI knows how to do it. So that's the difference. That's how I see that I still need to be there to give this guidance to these AI-assisted tools for them to actually help me be better at what I do. Number 2, GitHub Copilot is not a compiler. So GitHub Copilot is also not an automated tester. You need to go and test your code. It doesn't actually know if it gave you code that works. It gave you something, and it thinks it's the best. In some cases, it's just crap. So go look at the code that Copilot gives you. It's also not a security scanner, so ensure that you also have your additional layer of security. And lastly, the AI can't read your mind. And I see a very big advantage with this limitation, because in some cases, as a developer, I'm just doing things, and I don't know what I'm doing. But when I'm working with AI, I have to be very detailed. I have to know exactly what I'm doing. I'm moving from step A to B, and AI also helps me understand what I'm doing. So AI can't read your mind. It helps you be very clear about what it is you're building, what approach you're taking. If you're leaving approach A over B, it gives you a why. So I also see this as a very useful limitation that AI comes with. So as I conclude, we analyzed and saw that on average, developers share that they spend between 15 and 90 minutes a day looking for solutions. On average, that's like 60 minutes. And that now, if you have a team of 30 developers, you're talking 30 hours. But again, professional developers involved in cutting-edge technologies. And frankly speaking, this will almost be everyone in the near future. Most companies are now turning towards using these cutting-edge technologies. And they spend another average of 7 minutes. So add on top of these 30 hours, we are adding another 3.5 hours of developers being stuck simply because they are working with cutting-edge technologies. So what that simply shares is that we really need to sit and redefine what's our individual AI strategies. How can I sit back as a developer? How can I refactor what I am doing? How can I refactor my approach to technology? If I spend 6 hours writing code, can I make that 3 hours and then have 3 hours to do something that I consider to be more meaningful? So that's basically what I had prepared. If we can just quickly recap what we've discussed in terms of Copilot. Best practice, have your comments being single, specific, and short to get the most out of these tools. Then Copilot loves patterns. So for workloads that you don't really enjoy, regex, cron jobs, Copilot loves patterns. So hey, dispose all these tasks to AI and then work on what you enjoy. Trust but verify. Don't just trust code or anything you get from AI. We've actually seen, behind the scenes, you actually see AI giving some ridiculous answers. So ensure you trust, but just verify what you're getting. And context is everything. Just the tips that we've shared, ensure that you're giving it enough context for it to be useful and actually be of positive impact to you. Iterate, iterate, iterate. Don't just get the first piece of code and then push that to your production workflow. Work on it, improve it, customize it, personalize it, and just work and build on top of what AI generates for you. So that's basically it from me. Thank you so much for listening. I would really appreciate if you could just take a moment to scan this code and give us feedback. This will really help the future speakers and would also help me improve for my Cape Town delivery. So if there's a way I can improve this talk, please definitely share that feedback with us. We'll really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.